Tom and Megan conclude Loki Season 2 with glorious purpose.
Megan, we are at the end, and we are at Loki Episode 6, the final episode. What were your initial thoughts? Because I can't ask you what your expectations were, because whatever they were greatly exceeded.
My very initial reaction to it was very similar to my reaction to Episode 1. What's going on? Why don't I get it? I was able to spend a little more time with the content, and eventually I thought it packed a big emotional punch. It said a lot of really good things. I loved it. This was a great series. What about you?
I loved it at the end, because at the end it seemed to me to be as fine, and if not ending, an exclamation point or period on one phase, one complete cycle of an MCU character's development that we have not seen in really any other character. Now, we've obviously seen growth, and Tony Stark, Iron Man is good at character, Incredible Hulk. It doesn't matter which character, they've all grown. But here we had a really literally from a God of Mischief to the guy, he's called now the God of Stories. I thought it was closer to the God of Life, because I thought he was holding together the tree of life. But what he tried to learn in Episode 5 around controlling his time slipping, he put into practice in Episode 6. And it was as fine a science fiction as you could have ever asked for, in my opinion.
Oh, and the montage to end all montages. It was great, just the going back again and again with the little indications of how much time had been passing. Just, wow, what a lot of work to put in to save the universe. From the character you'd never expect it from.
Yes, absolutely. And what it brought, I know this is a completely different analogy, but when Bruce Springsteen really became Bruce Springsteen, it was when he released his album Born to Run. And he recorded the album and re-recorded it some 300 times. Wow. And he would just say again, because it wasn't right to the sound in his head. Here, Loki was saying again, and it wasn't right, but he could change what was happening to make it right. And that was to speed everything up. And the point where he realized that Timely was not going to be able to keep the timeline together, and he walked out and took his place. I don't recall there being any dialogue or even an internal monologue. It was just he recognized he had to do it. I'm not sure if at that point he recognized he was moving to deity status or not, but it seemed to me he recognized this was his destiny to keep the timeline together. As the timeline was, I'm not sure you'd call it spaghettiing, but as it was splitting, he was grabbing individual timelines and holding them together and putting them together in bundles and then putting them into the tree. And I guess I wondered how he realized this is it. Only I can do it. This is my destiny, and I'm going to fully do this. Did you have a different interpretation of any of that?
Yeah, I think the whole episode was leading up to exactly that. Because first he's thinking, I can change this functionally. I can change this with the science, like he talked about with OB originally. And he goes back and he tries to alter how the resources or the information that the team has to try and get the new part into the time loom to try and fix it. And realizes that's not going to work. It's got to go back a little further. So then he has iteration after iteration where he's fighting Sylvie, trying to convince her not to kill He Who Remains. And he fails. And then they have this, he comes in conversation with He Remains, understanding that no, it's not about when it happens. It's not about how it happens. It's about who is doing it. And I think that's when he realizes, but he still can't do it because he believes, I think at first, that the thing he's got to do, I thought they were leading up to him killing Sylvie. I thought that was going to be the solution to this problem. But instead, he goes back and he talks to Mobius. And that, I think for me, it was his conversation with Mobius in that kind of screening room that had the biggest emotional impact to me, where they talk about the meaning of purpose and how you're burdened with glorious purpose and it's more burden than purpose. Oh, that was the part I think that really got me in the episode. And that's when he really knew the burden, he has to take on the burden. No one else can take on the burden. He's the only one who has the knowledge. He's the only one who has the power. And so he's got to do it. And just, he knew, because of knowing Sophie, every Loki is going to lose or end up alone. Well, he doesn't have to lose. He can win, but he is going to end up alone. It was shattering.
And I agree. At first, I thought he was going to have to kill Sylvie, and that would be the turning point. But no, he didn't. But he did recognize, and I know I've said this in this podcast, and I certainly said it in our prior one, episode 5, this incredible growth from literally the God of Mischief to the God of Stories, and really achieving a level of deity status that his brother and father had, that he never had. I'm not quite sure how he's going to get to share it now, because the other thing that flashed in my mind was the Greek myth of Atlas, who stands at the end of the earth and holds the sky up on his shoulders. And there's a story involving Hercules where he tricks Atlas, and Atlas is condemned to holding up the sky forever. But the last scene, as they pan back from Loki sitting in the tree, I thought of Atlas, and is that his epitaph now, to sit holding it all together, or will he be able to insert himself back into a story at some point going forward?
I don't know. I think the Atlas is a good analogy. I got Doctor Who from it. I got the Last of the Time Lords, because that's what he said. We're all stories in the end, and that's, if Loki became the God of Stories, he's holding everyone's stories, and if he's the God of Stories, then that's exactly where he needs to be. I thought it was extremely elegant.
Shout out for you to tapping into your colonial heritage. We rarely hear that from you, but actually, great analogy. I'd not seen Doctor Who in that, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and just the lonely Time Lord. Oh.
What about the epilogue? Wasn't that just as great a wrap up as you possibly could have asked for?
And this was, I think, one of the things that I found it so hard to understand initially is, Loki created the TVA. He created a new TVA to work with the new World Tree universe. Unbelievable. The growing, and it's our job to grow together instead of prune the branches and all the imagery and all the. It's gorgeous, and I think I didn't feel like Mobius' story was quite resolved, maybe because he didn't fully reinsert. But watching him at least see his family was quite lovely, and just the end. I still have the epilogue. I don't quite understand yet. I don't think, but everything that came before it was so emotionally satisfying. I'm okay with it.
I was so thrilled to see Miss Minutes. That sort of
You
covered
love Miss
everything
Minutes.
for me. I love Miss Minutes.
We've got to get
and
you
it
a
was
t-shirt.
so great. If Santa says I've been a good boy, maybe Santa will bring me one. But Miss Minutes, hope you brought her back. Hopefully she's not the AI killing drone that she became, or AI killing machine rather. So I love that. I loved obviously Dawn and then Loki. It was not clear to me if he was invisible to Dawn or he was on just a different temporal plane. But I saw a lot of wistfulness in Loki's eyes on that scene. Even though the focus was on Dawn, I felt really almost a sadness and a joy, because Mobius was where he wanted to be and where he belonged, and Loki couldn't be a part of that going forward.
Yeah, it's just so heartbreaking. It gave me some comfort to know that Mobius' place in the timeline was mid-blip, so he hopefully got his wife and the mother of his children back, and they became a happy family again. But I guess it remains to be seen. What did you think of the Renslayer final scene in the void at the end of time?
She's pissed off some really important people, and she does have a good role though. She, I think, is going to keep Renslayer, for those who don't recall, was pruned in episode 4, but she wakes up in the void, and now she lives in the with the entity Alowith, and I think there's more of her story to come, potentially in connection with the Kang variant who appeared at Quantumania Ramatut, but it's an open question at this point. The one that I really enjoyed was Victor Timely. because it went back to the opening scene where the TVA handbook was placed on his windowsill. And it goes back to the scene where he's working on his candles and the windowsill is open and you see the curtain flutter from the breeze, but no book appears. And so that seems to me to indicate that he will not go down that variation of time of the timeline, but he'll live out his life as fraudster or inventor or whatever he was in that episode, Victor Timely.
Of course, because now Loki is he who remains.
Yes.
That's just what a journey for a lonely god.
I think I was just stunned by the ending, and I never would have thought Loki would be the one to save literally the world or the universe even. I'm not sure where he goes from here. Some of the readings I did for this podcast suggested, or basically hoped, there's no Loki season 3 because they thought they nailed this ending so perfectly. My sense is that he will reappear in the multiverse movie series at some point because now he is literally a deity. So I just thought that this just nailed it perfectly, Megan.
I think so. I was also doing some reading about this episode, and I think it was Owen Wilson, so Mobius, in an interview said, no, we've got to let this be the ending. Let us close the book. No one ever closes the book anymore. And I hope they are brave enough to keep the book closed. I like Loki in this spot. I hope they do it. We'll have to see. It's the MCU, so they might drag several more seasons out of it.
Well, Megan, that brings us to the end of Loki Season 2 for this series, because that's what heroes do. Probably be our last episode posting before the holidays, before Christmas. So I want to wish everyone a happy holidays. I hope you've enjoyed our exploration of Loki Season 2 as much as we have enjoyed watching it and talking about it on this podcast. With that, I am Tom Fox.
I'm Megan Dougherty. Thank you, everyone.
This is Tom Fox again. Thank you so much for listening to the concluding episode of Loki Season 2. Megan and I are going to take a short hiatus over the December holidays, but we'll be back in 2024 with 2 new series. The first one will be our top 10 favorite Deep Space Nine episodes, and our second will be, we're going to take a deep dive into the characters of the MCU. If you'd like to be a part of either one of those series, we'd love to hear from you, as we love to have guests. So email me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. Because That's What Heroes Do is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.